The reporting about the president being briefed on the fact that Iran might close the strait, I think the president here was the victim of his own success militarily in Venezuela in thinking this was going to be easy, and the cautions by General Kane or others were simply not worth listening to, abiding by. We could overcome them. And that kind of overconfidence, the failure to recognize that in war things are unpredictable, has led us into this increasing quagmire where we don't have a changed regime, where we don't have a secure strait, where the cost of fuel and price at the pump is going up. Now, in terms of the terms that we have in Congress, or the tools we have, we've been introducing war powers resolutions. We're going to introduce and have introduced more, and we'll be taking those up, I think, fairly soon. And I expect as this drags on, and in particular, if they do introduce ground troops, those resolutions are going to gain more and more Republican support. But at this point, we're reliant on Republican members of the Senate to reassert our congressional war power. They have thus far refused. I hope that changes, and I hope it changes before we see further loss of American lives.
So, Senator, while we have you with us, we want to get you in on a couple other items, including this recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal written by former Obama White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel that was headlined, "Opposing Trump Isn't a Global Strategy." And it reads in part this way: Democrats need to realize that foreign policy demands results, not merely rules. Defending the sanctity of the system is different from projecting strength as a virtue. The most important question is whether Mr. Trump's approach advances America's global security and economic interests. What the American people need to hear from Democrats isn't arguments about the process, but a clear articulation of the strategy we would pursue. For our party, this is a threshold issue. Democrats need to explain how would we use all our foreign policy tools, economic statecraft, military power, political persuasion, and cultural influence, to advance our interests and security. That means taking a clear-eyed view of the challenges we face on the global stage. Americans don't choose presidents to be desk clerks or pencil pushers in the name of international norms. They want leaders they can be confident will secure America's interests. Rahm Emanuel rumored to be considering a presidential run in 2028. So, Senator, let's get your thoughts here. He's basically saying it's not enough just to say no to Trump. And we've had that phenomenon here at home for a while. But Democrats need to articulate their own vision. But he's saying that needs to apply overseas as well with foreign policy. How would they do that?
Well, I think he's right. At the same time, we're at war right now, and I think it is important for us to push back on what the president's doing, because it is raising the cost on the American people and putting our soldiers and our Marines now in harm's way. But more broadly, Democrats have articulated a vision that is a deep contrast to the president. Just using the current situation, Democrats are solidly in support of Ukraine. We want to provide stronger material support for Ukraine. We would not be lifting sanctions on Russia right now, which is just filling the Russian war coffers with more money to make war against Ukraine. We would be seeking Ukraine's help participation in countering the Iranian Shahed drones, which they have great experience. That's contrasting with the president denigrating Zelensky, blaming Zelensky for his own actions, for the president's own actions in taking the pressure off Russia. There are some sharp contrasts that don't involve simply saying we support international institutions. But I would also say that we are very firmly supportive of NATO. We recognize NATO's value. The president does not. And we see with the president's call now on NATO to help bail him out of this problem he's created, the necessity of having strong alliances. So there are very different foreign policy positions that don't involve simple support for institutions.
And, Senator, lastly, you sit on the Agriculture Committee. And certainly California is the heart of much of America's agriculture industry. Well, the Trump administration is saying it now wants to make it easier for migrants to work on farms in the U.S. after previously targeting them in deportation rates. The New York Times is reporting the administration is working to expand and cheapen the H-2A guest worker visa program by lowering wage requirements and allowing housing to count as compensation for those workers. The reason? After years of labor shortages in agriculture, The administration's deportation raids and border crackdowns are only making things worse. About 40% of crop workers are unauthorized migrants. Last October, the Labor Department revealed in a filing that the near total cessation of unauthorized migration and lack of legal workers is, quote, threatening the stability of domestic food production. So, Senator, I'll just put that on a T for you. Go ahead.
Farmers are really in a difficult position because in addition to the immigration raids that have discouraged farm workers from showing up at work and leaving fields untended, you also have tariffs which are just crushing farmers. And now you add to it the increased costs, not only from the tariffs, but from fertilizer not getting through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a perfect storm of awful for farmers. Now, I don't know whether, frankly, to give much credence to the president's now interest in changing or improving or making modifications to migration policy, because we've seen this before in the beginning of this administration. When farmers first raised hell about what the president's policies were doing, you saw the president say, we're going to exclude those who are undocumented but working on farms. And then you heard pushback from Stephen Miller, and the president did an about-face. No, there's no exclusion of those workers. So is this just the latest kind of iteration of the president flip-flopping because he doesn't know what to do? I will believe it when I see it. But right now, all of this is conspiring to raise the cost on consumers going to the grocery store in direct violation of what the president promised he would do.
Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. Senator Schiff, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.